A single cyber attack on an aviation software platform has brought Europe's busiest airports to their knees, forcing staff to write baggage tags by hand like it was 1985. This software failure is a reminder of the interconnected third-party complexity of our threat landscape. And for Collins Aerospace's passenger processing system, it exposed how modern efficiency has created dangerous single points of failure across entire industries. While European airports scrambled to restore digital operations, Russian fighter jets were testing NATO's patience in a very different way, deliberately violating Estonian airspace for 12 minutes in what officials called an unprecedentedly brazen provocation. Coming up on Unbreakable Ventures, we examine how a cyber attack on shared airport systems reveals the hidden vulnerabilities of cost-cutting efficiency models. How Russian military aircraft are systematically probing NATO's eastern borders in ways that suggest something more coordinated than routine testing. And we'll dive into our quickfire segment covering 5 emerging threats, including Harvard students turning smart glasses into surveillance tools, AI hallucinations, and Thailand's banking crisis. Welcome to Unbreakable Ventures. I'm Ollie Law, and you are listening to our fortnightly risk update where we dive into emerging and current risks from around the world, focusing on some big stories and some you may have missed. We use the categories from the World Economic Forum's Global Risk Report to simplify the threats we're monitoring, but we also do some deep dives and interviews with industry peers. It's Monday the 22nd of September, and we're covering the world's global threats over the last fortnight, so grab a coffee and let's get into it.
Thank you for joining us, Simon. I can see that you're in the Czech Republic. Tell us, how serious do you think this cyber attack is?
Well, it's extremely worrying, and of course there will be tens of thousands of passengers affected, but the fact that this is happening on a busy late summer's day across Europe is very, very worrying, and of course the airlines will want to know what went wrong and what's being done to stop it in the future.
Friday evening, September 20th. Passengers at Heathrow Airport watching confusion as electronic check-in kiosks suddenly go dark. Staff appear with handwritten forms, baggage tags are being written manually. It's like stepping back 30 years in aviation technology. This wasn't a power outage or hardware failure. This was a cyber attack targeting Collins Aerospace, the company that provides the digital backbone for passenger processing at airports across Europe and beyond. Collins Aerospace's Muse software, which stands for Multi-User System Environment, is something most passengers have never heard of, but it's critical to how modern airports function. Muse powers electronic check-in, baggage tagging, and boarding pass validation, allowing airlines to share desks and gates instead of maintaining separate counters. Within minutes of the attack, operations at Heathrow, Brussels, Berlin, and Dublin were crippled. Staff resorted to handwritten baggage tags and phone-based boarding lists, recreating an era of travel most thought was obsolete. Let me provide some context on why this matters so much. Modern airports don't operate like they used to. Airlines no longer maintain separate check-in counters for efficiency reasons. Instead, they share desks, kiosks, and gates through what's called a common use system. It's brilliant for cost savings until that one shared system fails. Collins Aerospace, a subsidiary of defense giant RTX, serves 170 airports globally. When their Muse platform went offline, it didn't just affect one airline or one airport. It simultaneously disrupted operations across multiple countries. Brussels Airport warned that the incident would continue impacting flights through Sunday and requested airlines cancel half of Monday's departing flights. As of recording, major disruptions and cancellations continue, with Heathrow seeing delays continuing through the night. This incident reveals something uncomfortable about our digital dependencies. In pursuing efficiency and cost reduction, we've created systems where a single point of failure can cascade across entire industries. We saw this with CrowdStrike many months back. The aviation sector has seen a 600% increase in cyber attacks from 2024 to 2025, according to French aerospace company Thales. But this attack wasn't targeting flight safety systems or air traffic control. It targeted the passenger processing infrastructure that airports have consolidated for efficiency. So who does this put most at risk? If you operate in industries that have embraced similar shared platform models, this incident should concern you. Any business relying heavily on third-party software providers for critical operations faces the same vulnerability. whether that's cloud-based customer management systems, shared logistics platforms, or integrated payment processors. Organizations using common use or shared infrastructure models should be particularly alert regardless of your industry. The efficiency gains that make these systems attractive also create systemic risks when they fail. Companies in regulated industries should note that under the EU's NIS2 framework, suppliers of essential services must demonstrate robust operational controls and tested incident management capabilities. Collins should have had failover systems ready to restore operations within hours, not days. And if you're managing supply chain risks, this incident demonstrates how quickly vendor failures can propagate through your operations. Remember, a cyber attack on your critical service provider becomes your operational crisis. For mitigations, we've identified several immediate actions organizations should consider. Again, this is aimed at any organization that has integrated and third-party vulnerabilities, not just the aviation industry. First, demand your critical service providers demonstrate robust failover capabilities with contractually binding recovery times. Collins should have had clean standby systems ready to switch tenants within hours, not days. Require evidence of tested incident response plans, not just documentation. Second, diversify your dependencies where possible. If your business relies on a single provider for essential functions, you're accepting single point of failure risk. Evaluate opportunities to distribute critical functions across multiple vendors or maintain hybrid solutions. Third, ensure your manual fallback procedures are regularly tested and staff trained. The airports that recovered fastest were those whose teams could seamlessly switch to manual operations, while technical teams worked on restoration. Don't assume digital systems will always be available. Fourth, monitor your vendor's security practices as closely as your own. OSHA violation histories are public records for safety issues. Cybersecurity incident histories should be part of vendor risk assessments too. Finally, prepare for regulatory scrutiny. The EU's NIS2 directive, which comes into force next month, broadens the legal definition of critical infrastructure to include IT suppliers. Expect increased compliance requirements for essential service providers. This incident may not feel immediately relevant to many businesses, but the lessons about shared infrastructure vulnerabilities are universal. When efficiency optimization creates systemic risk, the question isn't whether failures will occur, it's how quickly you can respond when they do. This event is ongoing. No doubt we will see more lessons and findings in the coming weeks, but let it be another solid example of our growing complex operational environments. And if this isn't more evidence we need integrated resilience solutions, then I don't know what is. Before we move on to our second threat update this week, let's look at 5 quick-fire emerging threats we've picked up throughout the last fortnight. These will be noteworthy stories we think you should know about, but less detailed than our 2 core threats analysed. 2 Harvard computer engineering students created an app that transforms Meta Ray-Ban smart glasses into real-time facial recognition and doxing devices. The system identifies strangers on campus and displays their personal information like names, job titles, and workplace addresses directly on the wearer's lens. By connecting to an external system on campus, they were able to generate real-time information. While not publicly available, it demonstrates how consumer technology can rapidly evolve into privacy nightmares without regulatory oversight. It's time to consider an evolution on how we manage privacy. OpenAI researchers have acknowledged that large language model hallucinations, plausible but false statements, aren't engineering flaws but mathematical certainties. Even with perfect training data, fundamental statistical limits guarantee some level of error. This admission forces enterprises to accept AI error as a feature to manage, not a bug to eliminate, requiring stronger oversight and uncertainty estimation in AI deployments. How does this sit for the ambitious education industry who plan to utilize AI in its curriculum? Or what about organizations using it for integrated intelligence? Australia formally recognized Palestine as a sovereign state, joining many other countries and updating government documents from occupied Palestinian territories to State of Palestine. Organizations should consider how their political leaders' stances may influence international business relationships, particularly given the volatile approach we've seen from various administrations toward allies taking independent political positions. New data reveals China's industrial output and retail sales growth slowed to their weakest pace in about a year. Drivers include the property sector debt crisis, uncertain job markets, and trade tensions with the US. Weather disruptions were also partial factors, but economists warn the slowdown appears structural enough to require policy stimulus, potentially affecting global supply chains dependent on Chinese manufacturing. And finally, Thailand's aggressive crackdown on online scam networks inadvertently froze thousands of innocent personal and small business accounts using automated tracking tools. The result was public panic, cash withdrawals, and businesses shifting to cash-only operations. The incident highlights the delicate balance between security enforcement and due process protections when automated systems make decisions at scale. Further sources and references can be found in the footnotes of this podcast, but without further ado, let's look at our second threat update this week.
Donald Trump has warned of big trouble after Russian military jets entered Estonian airspace. Moscow has been accused of provocation as it once again breaches the borders of a NATO nation.
While European airports dealt with cyber disruption, something far more provocative was happening in the skies above the Baltic Sea. And unlike software failures, this threat comes with hypersonic missiles. 3 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets deliberately violated Estonian airspace for 12 minutes on Friday, flying without flight plans, with transponders switched off and ignoring all radio contact from Estonian air traffic control. This wasn't a navigation error or mechanical failure. Estonian officials called it unprecedentedly brazen, and they were right to be alarmed. Estonia sits on NATO's eastern flank, sharing a border with Russia and positioned strategically on the Baltic Sea. The Russian jets entered near Vaindloo Island in the Gulf of Finland, flying parallel to Estonia's border from east to west before Italian F-35 fighters stationed in Estonia forced them out. But here's what makes this particularly significant. This was the 4th Estonian airspace violation this year, and the first involving a formation of fighters capable of carrying hypersonic Kinzhal missiles.
It was a very clear provocation. It was definitely meant like this.
The MiG fighter jet spent 12 minutes in Estonian airspace. Italy, Finland and Sweden all scrambling jets to intercept them.
Let me provide context on why this incident represents more than routine military posturing. This violation is part of a broader systematic pattern. Just over a week earlier, NATO shot down Russian drones that had violated Polish airspace, the first time NATO forces fired shots since the Ukraine war began. Romania also reported Russian drone incursions the same weekend as the Estonian incident. Russia is methodically testing NATO's resolve and response times along the alliance's entire eastern border. The escalation from individual aircraft to fighter formations suggests increasing confidence in their ability to probe defences without triggering military responses. Estonia has invoked NATO Article 4 consultations, a mechanism allowing urgent talks when territorial integrity is threatened. This is only the 9th time Article 4 has been invoked in NATO's 76-year history. That tells you how seriously this is being taken. Czech President Petr Pavel publicly warned that repeated violations risk escalation and argued NATO must be prepared to react militarily, including shooting down intruding aircraft if necessary. This represents a significant hardening of responses compared to previous Russian probes. The timing is also notable. The violations occurred just days after Collins Aerospace announced it had signed a contract with NATO to provide electronic warfare and battle management software. While it appears to be unrelated to the airport cyber attack, it demonstrates how Russian intelligence tracks Western defence infrastructure developments. So, who should be most concerned about this escalating pattern? If your business operations span regions where geopolitical tensions are escalating, particularly Eastern Europe, systematic boundary testing suggests potential for broader disruptions. Supply chains running through NATO's eastern borders face increased risks of sudden airspace closures or military restrictions. Organisations with energy infrastructure projects should be particularly alert. Russia has previously targeted energy infrastructure in hybrid warfare campaigns, and the Baltic region contains critical energy interconnections between NATO allies. Companies dependent on stable international agreements and predictable transport corridors should monitor this closely. The pattern suggests Russia is probing for weaknesses in NATO's collective defence commitment, which could affect trade relationships and operational security. And if you're considering business expansion into Eastern Europe, factor in the current security trajectory. The violation suggests long-term tensions rather than short-term posturing, which affects investment risk calculations. For preventative actions, businesses should implement several immediate measures. First, establish geopolitical risk monitoring if you operate in affected regions. Military tensions can escalate quickly from probing to active restrictions. Monitor NATO and EU threat assessments regularly, not just business news. Second, diversify operational geography where possible. Don't concentrate critical business functions in areas where military tensions are rising. The Baltic region, while economically attractive, now carries elevated security risks that may persist. Third, implement currency risk management strategies for regional exposure. Military tensions typically create currency volatility as markets price in escalation risks. Ensure adequate hedging for operations denominated in Baltic or Eastern European currencies. Fourth, update crisis management protocols to account for sudden airspace closures, border restrictions, or military activity that could disrupt logistics and communications. Unlike natural disasters, military tensions can create operational restrictions with minimal warning. Fifth, engage with government export and security agencies if you operate in defence-related sectors. The Collins Aerospace NATO contract demonstrates how civilian technology companies become involved in security infrastructure, potentially creating additional regulatory requirements or operational restrictions. Finally, prepare for extended tensions rather than quick resolution. The systematic nature of Russian probing suggests a long-term strategy of testing Western responses. Business planning should account for persistent rather than temporary security concerns in the region. This incident reveals how quickly geopolitical tensions can escalate from routine monitoring to active military probing. Unlike cyber attacks, military provocations carry the risk of kinetic responses that could fundamentally alter regional operating conditions. The geopolitical tensions are the highest they have been in decades. We must take these warnings seriously and begin looking at how we can protect our people and our assets from the impacts of war. Don't sleep on this, even if you feel contempt down here in New Zealand or you're a small business in New York, it impacts us all. That's it for today's update. If you need help navigating these threats or building a plan to protect your business, the same advisors who collate these insights are here to help. Head over to unbreakableventures.com to book a complimentary chat online with one of them. And if you found this resource useful, consider subscribing to Unbreakable Ventures or sharing the article with your network. After all, resilience is about community and communication. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, stay safe.
Unbreakable Ventures is brought to you by the Senior Advisory Team at Fixing, a boutique resilience advisory based in the Oceania, ASEAN and India regions. Special thanks to our sponsor and Europe's leading SaaS provider for resilience software, F24. Our resources are researched and published by industry specialists across New Zealand, Australia, Malaysia and the UK. This podcast provides advice and opinion on disaster recovery and the threat landscape. The content is not a substitute for expert guidance during a crisis. Unbreakable Ventures is trademarked by Fixing Consulting Partners, a Fixing Group company.